All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our bi-weekly meeting. We've got a little over 22, 23 folks, so we can go ahead and get started. Just as a reminder, I am recording this. Not sure how long this meeting is going to be based on the lack of comments we received, or I received. Only Exelon Utilities provided anything in response or in follow-up to last week's meeting. So why don't we just start with that? Jacob, Ethan, you guys there?
Yeah, I'm here, and I can talk through our comments.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, so one of the items you had asked us, Judge, to follow up on is the non-consensus items that were coming out of the last phase, and so as we looked at kind of the order, we kind of felt like while the commission didn't weigh on specific details within the non-consensus, they did kind of give us a path forward to be able to address the non-consensus items. And so the commission reaffirmed its position of things that it wants incorporated within DER, like forecasting of electrification, EVs, improved hosting capacity analysis, incorporation of non-wire solutions, right? They reaffirmed their interest in all those things. And they did ask utilities to be able to provide implementation plans for all of them, and ultimately having DSP be something that's flexible and workable for kind of all the utilities. And also with the establishment of the tech conference, the commission reaffirmed that stakeholders will have opportunities to review those implementation plans, be able to provide feedback and comments on them, and the commission will have has the right after those hearings, should they feel any of those directions are not appropriate, to be able to provide some type of order directing the utilities in a specific direction. They reaffirmed their belief that the utilities bear the responsibility for system planning and need the reasonable amount of nimbleness for that decision making. And they also introduced the concept or in that cost recovery piece, in that prudency review, new DSP related prudency evaluations, right? Ensuring that the DSP process is being sufficient to be able to yield a prudent investment plan. And so I think putting all that together, I think the path forward really is that the utilities, for many of these non-consensus items, and within our comments, we listed out which non-consensus items specifically we thought they would fit into this. But for those non-consensus items, that the utilities, as part of their filings, provide those implementation plans of how they're looking to address them. That creates a space then for stakeholders and staff and all parties to be able to review them, provide comments and feedback. It creates the space for the commission to be able to review them and, again, provide feedback or provide direction through an order. And that, that approach, we think is consistent with the commission's order, right? And I think that's what we're all looking to do is meet the goals that the commission's kind of putting forward. And we think this approach kind of accomplishes that. So before jumping into any of our other comments, I'll pause there for anything.
No. Appreciate it. Took me a second there to unmute myself. All right. So any responses? To this? Can we get rid of all the non-consensus items and essentially worry about it later? Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, this is Dave Bedard with Potomac Edison. I did read through Exelon's comments, and we do support that at PE as well.
Appreciate it, sir. All right. Not surprising there. Yes, sir, Mr. Bartlett or Dr. Bartlett. Welcome back. Hope you had a good trip wherever you went. Sir, if you're talking, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Somehow my programs got updated against my will, and my camera doesn't work, and all sorts of things. But anyway, yeah, I came to this meeting because having missed the last one with the question of what we're trying to get done before November and what we're trying to get done before as a process of making final recommendations for regulation development, which is a year from now, a bit more. And that's still an outstanding question, because if we basically say, well, okay, we're done, the utilities are going to do all the rest of the work, then there's no further discussion on recommendations as far as I can see. We did go through a very important set of technical discussions and so on. We had the technical conference that brought some of the state of the art to the discussion. And my hope was that we were going to draw on the expertise that is out there and the experience from other states and so on and so forth, and come up with recommendations to the commission on how what should be included, what parameters would be established in recommendations that then the utilities would each in their own way comply with. This approach seems to blow that all off, and seems to basically say, we're done. The utilities are going to do the rest of the work, and we'll have a chance to comment on it at some point. I have trouble accepting that as where we are when we have a year left to go. And I do think that there is experience and expertise that we should be drawing on. I do not see in the working group now, but maybe this is a question. Do we have in the working group the expertise to draw on the experience from Massachusetts, New York, Illinois, and so on and so forth? And more importantly, are we positioned now in a way to say, okay, we're done with the work and just let the utilities carry on from then? I mean, we do have the experience of the 8 years since PC44 was established that the utilities aren't exactly rushing ahead. So I'm not comfortable with this position that's being proposed right now.
All right, thank you, sir. Jacob, you got any response or?
Yeah, I'll chime back in. I think Al, we're certainly not trying to brush off all the conversations that have happened so far. I think what we're like acknowledging is we've had a lot of good discussions, right? We've identified a lot of consensus on these topics, right? I think there was, for most of these non-consensus items, there was a lot of like really kind of partial consensus, right? We all agreed on looking at it, incorporating DERs and electrification and EVs into our forecasting. I think that was something all parties pretty much agreed on, right? I think where a lot of the non-consensus often came up was in the details of accomplishing that. And I think that's where we're recommending that, the regulation and the work that we've done can really be focused on agreeing that those things are to be incorporated, and that the flexibilities the utilities then require is in actually implementing that and in some of those details, because being overly prescriptive is where you start to lose some of that flexibility. And so that's where I think we're coming is we have had a lot of those technical discussions. We have heard them. We've come to a lot of consensus on most of these topics. That in most of these topics, I believe we agree that all of them should be incorporated, or we had aspects of consensus. And it's in those details that I think is where the utility implementation plan can really kind of help fill in that picture.
All right, thanks. Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, can I solve? I mean, there's the balance. I understand the concern from the utilities about the balance between overly prescriptive and more specific. But I do note that back in Order 91256, the commission did actually put in writing its observation that the utilities in many cases opposed or desired to slow or modify proposals, and that and based on these same reasons, that it would impose unreasonable transition costs and so on and so forth. And so they noted that this is the utility's position, but again, this idea of slowness and doing less rather than more, I think has characterized how we've gotten to where we are. And the idea that we could establish parameters based on technical expertise and experience from other states. Best practice, what works, what doesn't work, and what, if you do it, what might have collateral effects that we don't want to see. Those are discussions. We've got a year to have those discussions. So basically closing the door on those discussions, to me, doesn't make sense.
Just wanted to clarify a couple of things. I believe it was the commission that actually was the one that one of their goals was to ensure that the transition wasn't imposing unreasonable transition costs to ratepayers. So I just want to clarify, I believe in the order the commission stated that as an objective, not necessarily a utility position. And with the year that we have, I recognize we do have a year until implementation of the regulations, but obviously there's certainly like formal processes that have to go within that, right? We have a report due November 15th. We'd have to wait for another order from the commission after that. And so just recognizing that, well, yes, December is when we're looking to have regulation in, the actual timeline that we would have then to develop that regulation is certainly, I would say, significantly less than that.
So, yeah, and I don't want to dominate the conversation, but I believe that the report that's due in November and then the commission's report in December based on the November input is the utilities report on what's happened so far. That doesn't drive the discussions about what should be happening in the future. And so I think that they're really two almost disconnected process. We've agreed on a format for those reports, which is good, and one of the things the commission asked us to do. But we haven't, the report that the utilities are working on, which will then be summarized and reflected on by the commission in December, is going to be based on whatever has been done so far, absent DSP regulations. So, you know, after that, we have to decide what the regulation should look like. And that's what I think the next period of time is. But I'll stop talking as Sam and Ethan have there.
Right. Well, I guess my thought is just looking ahead, and I could be completely wrong. On our November 15th filing, we're supposed to provide an update to the commission as to where we are. My intent or my thought would be that we would hopefully address what was noted in the order, the previous commission order, hopefully tie up some loose ends on these non-consensus issues. And then we can start talking about regulations. But I would imagine that a subsequent order would be coming out after whatever we file on the 15th. Because I think regardless, we have to do regulations, but we're going to need additional guidance from the commission regardless of what happens, and that's going to take some time. Let me, Ethan, I'm assuming you wanted to respond to something Dr. Bartlett said, and Samantha, I see you with your hand up, so if you could just give me one.
Sam is ahead of me, please. Go ahead, Sam.
Okay, all right, thank you. Sam?
Yeah, thank you. I was going to switch gears a tiny bit, so maybe Ethan, you go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, I just, I would not characterize, and apologies, I am dealing with a cold right now, folks, so.
We got you loud and clear.
I wish it sounded that way in my head. I would not characterize the report that's coming out in November as what has come before. I was actually kind of surprised when we put in our sample, we included information on our DER forecasting, BG&E's DER forecasting for load and capacity planning. And I expected, honestly, I expected some members of this group to remark on that in some way beyond just looking at it as a report. And, it's just the form. And I expected that perhaps that would have, people would see that for the first time we were actually reporting out on where we are going, our implementation plans. And that's the kind of thing that will be in this document. There will be both what is in existence, and that's why I included the CVR piece. That's, an existing program. It's been long established. And then we are also going to be including the programs that are very much directly to the goals of the future goals of the CSNA. And that's going to be things like load forecasting, things like the updates on the development of our DRIVE Act VPP implementation, where we're going with that, other programs that you may not have heard of, and this is going to be a novel report because these all of these programs are going to be collected for the first time in one place. And a lot of them are going to be speaking to the future. The intent is to be able to inform rate cases. We know that there's a strong interest from staff and the Office of People's Counsel to have more clarity about where we're going to help inform rate cases. And that's going to be a lot of what's in there. And so I really don't want people to come away with the idea that they're going to get yet another phase 1 presentation on how we do load forecasting. That's, you all got plenty of that already. And thank you.
All right, Ethan. Sam, before I know you want to switch gears, Dr. Bartlett, in terms of the non-consensus and partial consensus items that are out there, I mean, do you have a proposal or thought on how to proceed or how to address those?
Judge McLean, I guess it really does depend. I sense from the correspondence we had about the possibility of getting technical assistance from something like through NREL with Lawrence Berkeley Lab and so on and so forth, that you're feeling that pressure to actually resolve these or finish with these non-consensus items for the December report, in which case it becomes harder. I mean, what we do have to draw upon is the output from the technical conference that the commission held, which I think maybe we should be looking at as we go along here for technical advice, if you will, on what's the best way to resolve some of these issues and still leave the utilities the room to respond in their own way. If we do that, though, I'm not sure what the regulation development process adds. I mean, we've been working for 2.5 years at this, and we've had a lot of discussions, but now we're saying, okay, the utilities take it from here. That's
their proposal. So I'm looking for some alternatives here because
okay. Well, my alternative is that we would actually spend at least part of the year and 4 months that we have before the recommendations on the. Jacob said the regulations are going to go into effect. I think in December of next year, we're required to have recommendations to the commission on regulations. Then there will be hearings and so on and so forth. And at some point, regulations will be developed. So we've got a ways to do the work. And during that time, I would suggest, I believe, I was offline for the last meeting, but I think Samantha did note that I think it's NREL that has free technical advice to commissions and their constituents exactly to help do this kind of work. So I think that just ending the discussion now and saying, okay, utilities should take the ball is shortchanging ourselves and shortchanging the state.
All right, thank you, sir. And my understanding of the way the regulations process works, and I'm sure other folks have more experience with it than I do, but they need to be published anywhere from 7, 8, 9 months out before they are actually implemented. So that kind of really shortens our time frame. Mr. Cathan.
All right, and I apologize. I was out on vacation for the last 2 weeks. Also did not receive that document. I don't know how. I went through my email, so I'm only looking at the Exelon, response right now. I'm a little bit confused, but also I'm supportive of Al's comments. It seems that the Exelon proposal is to essentially punt on these non-consensus items and not deal with them. And I don't support that. I think that, we need to go forward and really try to, really drill in, because these are the details on some of the core issues that we need to address. What I'm a little confused by is, Judge, is the what we're trying to do before November. Are you proposing that we're going to look at those lists of the non-consensus items and try to resolve them before November? Or is this something that's going to be part of our further discussion post-November and the development of the regulations? I think we can't avoid. I don't think we should avoid the various issues that are at least identified as non-consensus. And I fully support the idea of getting some technical support, a la NRail or whatever.
Thank you, sir. My thought would be we'd try to address these non-consensus items now, especially to the extent that if we can't agree on things, the commission's going to have to weigh in. And the longer we wait to let them know of outstanding issues, the longer it's going to take them to issue a ruling, and then that just is going to delay our drafting the regulations. Now, I mean, I guess we could certainly look at it as November 15th is not certainly a drop dead date that we have to stop meeting, because they did just ask for an update. But to the extent we can address, everything that's outstanding, that'd be my preference or hope. But I realize that we have 3, maybe time for a 4th meeting between now and then.
And I also was tracking their emails regards to, there isn't enough time to really pull in technical support in the level that we would need prior to November. But I do think that, some of these issues are just needs further analysis. And I think we're behind the 8 ball in trying to, get a lot of these resolved before November. So it's I don't know what that means for our November report.
Okay, thank you, sir. Go ahead, DeAndre. Can't hear you, sir. Well, we're waiting on DeAndre to come back. I can tell you, I'm frustrated by, I guess what I view as the lack of. I don't know if I want to say participation, but I got one set of comments in response to the meeting notes from last week, and that was it. I can't. It's in the court proceeding. I can't compel people to participate, but. And we can have some discussions, high-level discussions at these meetings. But if folks don't weigh in on written comments, the utilities can't respond. I don't know where to go from there. But it's certainly more helpful when folks kind of do the homework. And I realize everyone's busy.
Hello, can you hear me?
Can now.
Thanks. I think overall staff is in support of providing a space for utilities to produce hosting capacity analysis and other analysis to the work group for us to then comment on. Since in regards to Mr. Captain's and Mr. Bartlett's comments that we don't have the expertise in this group or the technical expertise in this group to establish or need assistance in establishing some upfront set rules. But I think that also supports staff's earlier suggestion or proposal is that from the regulatory process that we have an earlier technical conference to provide some feedback on some produced hosting capacity analysis, or that the work group reach out to some technical experts from New York and Massachusetts and some other areas that have already established a distribution system planning process to better inform us on how we may want to move forward with this. So I think it's either or. Either we move a technical hearing further in the closer or further up earlier in our DSP process that we propose to advise us on hosting capacity and forecasting and the other non-consensus areas that we discussed, or we reach out for some technical assistance from or some some feedback from some other technical experts in some other states. But overall, we think we're not opposed to the utilities taking the opportunity to do the analysis and present us with some results, so that with the understanding that we'll be able to comment and suggest any revisions to their existing analysis that better fits our needs or our suggestions or proposals. But then I guess that comes to the question of what kind of timeline are we working with to have that, to move forward with that type of, in that direction.
Right. Well, DeAndre, before you go, I mean, what, in response to the utilities comments, so are you saying you support their approach on these non-consensus items, and we'll just maybe you just want a better look or another opportunity to review the analysis they provide, or are you more in Al and David's camp?
I'm in support of the utilities providing us the results of their approach to hosting capacity analysis, DER forecasting for these various areas that they have suggested here. Of course, I mean, planning horizons, and there may be one or two other items in this list that I feel like we've already kind of, I thought that we had kind of set an understanding or consensus on. But in general, the technical analysis in regards to hosting capacity analysis, DR forecasting, and things of that sort, levels of granularity, we agreed that, you know, the levels of granularity are going to vary amongst the utilities. And so we want to, and the commission has asked us to consider the uniqueness of each of the different utilities. So setting a specific level of granularity doesn't support the commission's orders. So I would, you know, we have to have some flexibility in here, but with the opportunity to later present, comment, and provide our feedback on what's produced to then be utilized for any revisions that the utilities will make to the presented methodologies and analysis they provide. I think that provides us with a direction to go in. But I also suggest that we explored the possibility of acquiring technical assistance, either by way of reaching out to someone from New York or some other state that have gone through the process and established some guidelines that we may somewhat agree with, or in a direction we're considering here in the state, or moving the technical hearing earlier in the regulatory process to then get some expert feedback on what has been produced.
All right. Thank you. Jacob.
Yeah, thanks, Judge. I'm going to leave my camera off. I'm having internet issues right now, but no, I think, DeAndre, kind of where you're getting at is what, you know, very much what we are thinking, right? I think we all agreed DER forecasting for determining hosting capacity analysis or determining hosting reserve hosting capacity. I think that was something we all agreed on. That was the consensus, and giving, you know, that's the point that I think is what's worth being in regulation, is what's consensus, and then giving the flexibility for utilities to implement that, and then for utilities to be able to describe to folks in our filings what is our plan for implementing that. And then eventually, once it is implemented, obviously you would certainly begin to see the results of that implementation and that analysis. And so I'm curious, DeAndre, at least as I've been thinking about it in terms of what the utilities would be providing here, we'd be providing kind of the implementation plans. And that's really where the feedback of, is that the right process? Is that the right implementation timeline? Are there questions or comments or feedback from a technical perspective of that we would be providing? And so less so on, I mean, certainly also in the analysis, but in terms of what we're discussing today is more focused on just like, how are we doing those things? What are we doing and when are we doing them? So I think I think that can all happen regardless of when the technical conference is within the process. when you're looking at it and focusing on just what is the implementation plans.
I'm sorry, was that a question or?
No, that was just a statement basically saying, I don't think when in the process the technical conference happens matters with regards to the reviewing and evaluating the utilities implementation plans for implementing these processes.
Well, I was suggesting it in response to the sentiments of that several stakeholders or people within the work group have expressed in regards to having a technical expert available to provide more feedback on some of the suggestions or proposed approaches utilities are proposing.
So are you asking for the outside experts to review all the utilities filings or proposals early in the process, or?
Not exactly, but to provide the work group with more technical understanding.
Well, I'm still very concerned about the time frame here. All right, I know some folks have their hands up. I'll get to you in just a second, but let's assume we go to the NREL and ask for help. We can't just say, come in and fix our problems or give us proposals. We have to be, I would think we'd have to have a very targeted topic or topics that we want them to weigh in on. And just to keep in mind, maybe they weigh in on it and, there's still not an agreement. I know in the first report, both the utilities and some of the other stakeholders were citing the same witnesses' comments to support their own positions. So just a thought. Sam, you've been very patient.
Maybe. No, I am. Thanks. I mean, I don't know. I don't know whether I am or not. So let's see. There's a lot we're talking about right now, but I wanted to just, I think generally, echo what DeAndre just said about where things are. I think from my perspective, where this group is at, and I think part of the challenge of participation right now is, I think we've, dealt with the low-hanging fruit when it comes to establishing consensus in some ways. And I think the challenge we're facing right now is that the remaining issues are technical, but also what I'm hearing kind of implied by, all the folks requesting quote unquote technical assistance is that we as stakeholders who are, maybe doing this for the first time or working on this issue, certainly in Maryland for the first time, I think we want to better understand how the path forward compares to other states who've done this before. Because, that's what we want to make sure we're doing it in a robust way, right? And so what I'm thinking in terms of process here, and this both technical assistance, this proposal by the utilities to put forward an implementation plan. I guess I'm wondering process-wise if it would be, if we could kind of thread the needle here between all these perspectives, if, the utilities submit said implementation plan and upon doing so request technical assistance that would, to your point, Judge, be targeted, and what it would be asking for is that a national lab or someone perform some benchmarking. So say, okay, how does this implementation plan and, plan for the DSP, how does it compare to other states? And maybe we could select a handful of states and say, okay, we're proposing to do these scenarios while other states do other scenarios. I mean, frankly, I think there's going to be a wide variety, but point being, I think we're looking for some benchmarking because we want to feel confident that the approach to planning is as good as it can be. I'm interpreting others' comments there, but that's my sense of like why everybody's kind of clamoring for technical assistance, is in making sure that we're doing this the right way, for lack of a better word. So all that being said, I think, generally speaking, I appreciate the utilities proposal for a path forward. I think an implementation plan that allows folks to understand it and comment on it is intriguing. I think, my hesitation is, well, what does being responsive to feedback look like from the utilities perspective? I also have some more specific clarifying questions about what the implementation plan might include, but I'll maybe hold those until we kind of move off this technical assistance conversation.
All right. Thanks, Sam. So if I understood you, you'd like a long-term process, utilities submit their plan, and then essentially a third party would look at it, ideally?
Yeah, so I guess, here's what I'm thinking is that what utilities have proposed here is to file an implementation plan, which to me says, okay, here's our plan for what we want the DSP to look like for our utility. And from there, there's a comment period of some kind. I don't know if it's a conference or what it looks like exactly, but what I'm saying is that as part of that comment period, I want there to be, some kind of independent evaluation of how the utilities plans to implement the DSP or to put together the DSP compare to other states. So kind of a benchmarking analysis. And that might be a one-time thing. And also, this is all kind of predicated on me correctly understanding what an implementation plan is, right? So to me, an implementation plan is going to talk about what the utilities intend to include in the DSP when it's filed in December of 2025. I might be totally mistaken on the process here, but that's what I was assuming. So please correct me if my assumptions are wrong. You know what they say about assuming.
I do. Thank you, Sam. Ethan, Jacob, I see you guys have your hands up.
Ethan had his up first. I'll let him go first.
We did actually have a technical conference for DSP in January. The judge mentioned that many of us quoted it. There were some really great ideas in there, and I have a transcript that I refer to quite often. There was a lot of wisdom in there, and some of the wisdom was that a shadow DSP process where a secondary group evaluates from the outside is a bad idea. That was Paul DiMartini. He was very strongly came out against it, said that it tends to result in a lack of execution. This group has repeatedly complained that we are not moving forward, utilities are not moving forward, yet the utilities, we are the ones putting forward all of the proposals, all the things to move us, the vehicles. We are the ones who are providing with the templates, the form of the straw man of how we would have our conferences, how we would take your feedback. We've been moving things forward, and I'm going to talk a little out of school here. We spent a year going through the JADE roadmap, and I'm not sure what we got out of it, but we did it. And now we're back to, well, we need more technical details. Paul DiMartini also spoke to this moment. He spoke to how I would distinguish that we really need to think about three types of stakeholders. There's general public and community. There are folks that are engaged and knowledgeable, but not technical in the details. And then there are those are really deep in the technical knowledge. And those three audiences really need to be addressed in a way that fits with their needs. So I feel like Paul, he's seen this before. And he came to my first grid mod proceeding in 2018. And, he has seen this done repeatedly. We are now at the point where we have different groups of stakeholders. We have in this room right now, technical stakeholders who are engineers. We have non-technical but knowledgeable stakeholders who are in the industry. And then we have the public stakeholders. And so maybe this is a time for you all to think about what form you want for us to present the information you need. What are your interests? Because we are here to, we're going to be putting together a technical conference for your consumption as part of this process. We're going to bring forward our plans. What is it that you want to know? And that's, we're here to bring that forward so that you can comment on it in a way that is useful to you. And I highly recommend going back to the technical conference. There was a great deal of useful information in there from 3 different grid modernization experts. I really encourage it. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Jacob?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the one question Sam had asked about around, what would utility or feedback to utilities look like on these implementation plans, and us kind of taking them back. And the one thing I just want to highlight again is these implementation plans would be filed. These would be a part of those technical conferences, right? So all parties would be able to review it, be able to submit comments and provide feedback on it. And also as part of that, the commission has the opportunity to, file or, order the utilities to do something as a result of that, right? They have, they laid that out in the last order that they may issue post hearing orders to direct the utilities to do something. And so I think that's a space where if they feel that what the utilities are looking to implement are insufficient and have heard the stakeholder feedback around direction that they then feel is appropriate, that they then have the space to then issue that order. And so I think that approach kind of creates that flexibility for utilities to be able to propose incorporating those things and outlining kind of what the implementation and details look like. Stakeholders are able to weigh in and provide that feedback, and then the commission can help set the direction for the utilities to go depending on what they hear.
Go ahead, Sam, and then Al.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to respond to a couple of things Ethan mentioned and, clarify or I guess not clarify, repeat that, I think Ethan, you asked like, what do we want to know? And, what I spoke to a minute ago is that we want to know how the DSPs that will be filed in the state of Maryland compare to other states. That's the question. I know there was a technical conference. I attended it, and there was a lot of information coming out of there that I think we could use as part of this process. So, if your recommendation is that we go back and review that transcript in order to evaluate the implementation plans, I'd be open to that. But again, I think what I'm making here is a more specific request than what was covered in that technical conference. And I say that because that was broad and it was helpful. But I think we're getting down into the details now. And the other thing I want to just say is, look, I understand we've been at this for a long time. I also, want to mention that we had 2 pretty concrete proposals come out of the prior phase of this work group. One proposal from OPC that candidly I was very supportive of. And I think where we are at now is having to kind of compromise between those 2 things. And so I think I'm not frustrated by the speed of things. I am, I'll just leave it there.
All right, thank you, Sam. Al.
Yeah, thanks, Judge. So believe it or not, I think we might be moving towards some kind of a compromise here or some kind of balance. I think that, taking into consideration what DeAndre said and what Sam said, the one concern I have about the way Sam framed it is that there will be multiple plans because the different utilities are going to have their own plans, which means, but there's only going to be one set of regulations. So I think that we really need to come together around the content that is going to be what we bring to the commission to consider for regulation. So anyway, the 14 items, the non-consensus items, Judge, you asked about what's the content of what we want to ask about. I think that these are the items that we want to ask about, because there is, on each of these issues, there were different positions there on hosting capacity and on forecasting and on interconnection and another thing. Well, interconnection is the other group, and I actually agree with what the utility said about let's have the interconnection people take on the interconnection tasks. But anyway, those items, those non-consensus items are what we need to be working on, basically. And so what I might suggest would be that the utilities come in with a position on each of those 14 items. How do they see that each of these being actually worked out and applied in the context of regulation? So what would they ask? What would they suggest be the parameters that we look at in terms that specify in terms of what hosting capacity and reserve capacity and all those other things should be? And then we review that, and we review it at least with reference and taking into account the information that's in that technical conference. We might decide that we need some technical assistance, but it has a focus, which is to get these items worked out at a level of specificity that lets us know what is going to be required by regulation that the utilities come forward with in their plans. So this isn't a shadow process. We basically take these 14 items on as the work of the last phase of our building recommendations for regulation. So it really is part of our work. It's just essentially finishing the job and getting some help, or at least using the reference materials where we need to get these items resolved, rather than just leave it open.
All right.
So the bottom line proposal is that they go ahead, the utilities go ahead and make proposals on how they would deal with these 14 items. And the rest of us then look at that in the coming months and work it out. And if we need help, we get help.
All right. Well, let me just, before I turn it over. So my guess is the utilities are going to back their positions from the first go around. And they may provide some additional details, and we're going to still be back at square one with folks not agreeing with the utility position. So are you saying, I'm saying accept their position, get some more detail on them, and then go from there?
Are you referring to the positions as you reflected them in your report in April?
Yes, sir.
There's not a lot of detail in their actually storeman on those items. So there has been, they put in their positions, and that's why they're non-consensus. So they've heard that. I mean, if the response of the utilities to non-consensus items is we already took our position, well, that isn't helpful to the commission. They've heard the feedback.
Right, but they didn't make any decisions. See, I think, just again, I'm just thinking off the top of my head. As I see your proposal, it's almost a rehash of phase two, which Ethan didn't enjoy the trip down Jade as much as I did, since it was my first go around. But I mean, since the commission really didn't specifically say, they didn't rule on these non-consensus items. If I'm just putting myself in the seat of the utility, why should I change my position now? And I'm just going to give you some more details, but you're probably not going to change your mind. OPC is not going to change their mind. I don't know. If it seems like we're just going to be rehashing everything from the first go round.
Well, the commission asked us to reconsider those 14 items, and so I guess the utilities have to be part of that reconsideration.
Absolutely. And well, okay.
If they just come back with what they did before, that's not responsive to the commission's request.
I don't know if I agree with that, but okay. Because nobody else has come back with anything either, other than we don't like what the utilities are proposing.
Well, no, I think what Sam said is that, the OPC proposal actually had detailed, and it wasn't, I mean, it was extensively referenced, actually, drawing on some experience from other states and so on and so forth, other utilities, other commissions that had practice, put into practice certain approaches. So yes, there is a counter position on the table, and that's where these are non-consensus items specifically. Right?
I don't dispute that there's non-consensus items. What I'm
Right.
trying to do is trying to address them. And it sounds to me like you're saying, okay, utilities, you guys go back and try and come up with a compromise.
Yes, because otherwise, well, yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. You guys go back, come up with a compromise, then we'll look at it and use as reference, for example, the output from the technical conference and maybe some technical assistance so that we actually get forward. I mean, otherwise, they remain non-consensus items, because if they just come back and propose what they proposed before, and those of us who said, no, there's much better experience out there and we should be drawing on that, then we're back where we were. So if our job is to try to achieve consensus on these non-consensus items, then I would let the utilities take the first crack at it, and then we will all discuss it. So, I mean, that's our job. That's basically what the commission has charged us to do, is to have that further discussion, rather than just say to the utilities, okay, well, we're not going to discuss it anymore. You guys just do what you want.
All right. I understood, but this kind of goes back to my frustration on the lack of comments on this for this meeting. Mr. Auslander.
Thanks. Thanks, Your Honor.
Welcome to the party. You guys have been quiet.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you said, you basically summed up OPC's point is, that our position in our, comments on the phase 2 report is still our position. And, I guess you could say we're dug in, but I think that, the reason that we're dug in is because we sort of developed our positions on, the metrics and the other, non-consensus items after, a lot of work in the work group to try to reach consensus. So I think it's just this, I think on some of these items, I think there's just, a level of non-consensus that further discussion, I don't think is necessarily going to resolve. So I think at this point we are faced, with an order from the commission that has included certain directives, and what Exelon has proposed here in the comments that they submitted on the 5th are talk about an implementation plan, and I'm skeptical that the implementation plan that the utilities are going to propose is going to contain the level of granularity, the forecasting, all the various non-consensus items to our satisfaction. And I think at this point, I think we would be limited to raising any opposition we have in comments on those utility implementation plans, or as part of the process whereby the utility takes some feedback. But I guess I'd be surprised if the utility presents an implementation plan, we review it, see that it does not contain the level of information that we feel is necessary. We're going to raise that, and we're going to bring that up to the utility. I doubt the utility is going to suddenly change their position and say, okay, yeah, now we're going to give you the information at the level of granularity you're asking. So I think that what, part of your frustration could just be that we have sort of reached the end of where this, what discussion can yield. And I think, we are going to have to see how this plays out. But OPC is very skeptical that the commission is going to be able to exercise the oversight needed to ensure that, the state reaches the CSNA goals within the time frame set out in the law. If the utilities are pursuing distribution system planning as they're proposing, and as I think the commission might be envisioning.
Okay, so what's your suggestion? You guys are dug in, utilities are essentially dug in. Where do we go from here on the non-consensus issues that are out there that you don't think have been addressed by the commission?
Yeah, so I mean, at this point, the suggestion for the utilities to include them in their implementation plan, I guess, is one of the only paths forward. I would hope that maybe some, I guess, I would love to see a consensus could be reached during the process of, working with the utilities on the implementation plan. But, I guess I'm just skeptical that that's, realistically going to happen.
So are there any non-consensus items from our last go around that OPC is amenable to either, I don't want to say dropping or changing or compromising or dropping based on the commission's order?
I not at this time.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
Mhm.
All right, Ethan, you've been lighting up the comments, the chats.
I just felt like we had some pretty clear direction from the commission, and I'm hearing that OPC and other stakeholders don't accept the commission's direction. As a regulated utility, I don't know what we do with that.
Yeah. Last thing I want to do is go back to the commissions, like all those non-consensus items and partial consensus items, we can't agree on any of it still. I don't think that's going to be beneficial for anyone in the long run. Al.
Yeah, I appreciate that Ethan's substantially abstracting from the document, but the first paragraph of the commission's decision says the commission is hopeful that by addressing several core issues regarding major areas of non-consensus between non-utility and utility positions, a resolution of other DSP framework issues will be more achievable in the next phase of the work group activities. They're asking us to do the work, to actually, so like, I mean, if our conclusion is there's no way to resolve the difference between the OPC straw man. I mean, the commission did make one decision. They said, we don't want to litigate the process. We're not going to do an approval. We're going to do a review and a technical conference to look at it. Okay, that's fine. So in that sense, they went with the utilities position. But in everything else, they basically said, working group, go back and try to hammer out the resolution of these non-consensus items. So, but if we can't, I mean, if we're saying we can't, I was hopeful that we can. And because there are technical experiences and expertise to draw on, and we actually, the commission paid for some of that to happen, as Sam said, in a general sense, but now we need to apply it in a more specific way and say, the answer to the question, how hosting capacity analysis should be enhanced, including how capacity and DER maps should be pursued in the future, how new technologies will be integrated into planning processes. Those things, we haven't finished that work. We've had some discussions. If we can't, we can't, but I would like to think we can, but I'm always an optimist about that.
I don't agree. I don't disagree with your reading of the order, but I've got one proposal from the utilities, and then I've got OPC saying we're dug in. And so and under your proposal, the utilities are essentially negotiating against themselves, trying to see how much, if any, give, again, for lack of a better word, that they should get, that OPC will take. But I really don't want to say we couldn't agree on anything.
Yeah. Right. I mean, hopefully it's not against themselves. I mean, at some point, we're all going to have to evolve into the distribution system that we need. And it is a substantial change, and particularly for the utilities, who are the ones that own and manage the system. So yes, but the experience to date is it hasn't been the process that one would have hoped, starting back with PC44. And if we define it appropriately, then we can make it happen in a better way. So that's all I'm hoping, and I think that the commission has asked us to do that.
I agree 100%, but we have to have people that are willing to compromise on this, and it doesn't sound like we do, at least right now. Jacob.
Yeah. I something I've been thinking about, and I think this kind of reflected it in some of our language, is a lot of these non-consensus items were partial consensus, right? I think in a lot of it, there was agreement by parties. And I think, Al, to your point of, we need to be driving towards regulation, what's actually in the regulation, like all regulation, should be flexible enough for each utility to be able to implement it. And I think, we can look at this as how deep and how detailed do we need to get within each of these topics, right? So where we have levels of consensus on a lot of these topics, that may be the right appropriate level for the regulation to reflect. And so as we think about addressing these non-consensus items, or these partial consensus items, I should say, I think that's a path forward where we can, align on what we do agree on and what we have there, and move forward with that as kind of the foundation for the regulation. And then again, allowing the utilities to use the implementation plans to kind of lay out the details, recognizing that those details are going to be different for each utility, right? Systems are different, processes are different, customers are different. And so all those details are going to have to be tailored for the system that they're working. And so that's kind of, a thought is we have consensus in aspects on a lot of these things. So I think we should really kind of think about focusing there and allowing those implementation plans to kind of be where it gets filled out.
All right. Thank you, sir. Jacob.
Yeah. Thanks, Jacob. I don't disagree that there, are areas where there is partial consensus, but I guess, not enough consensus to, to have the item, be a consensus item versus a non-consensus item. And as far, what you mentioned as far as, putting, drafting regulations that reflect the level of consensus, I think the concern that I might have is that the absence of regulatory language is almost a ruling in and of itself, or, some type of, I guess it could be construed as a, reflection of commission intent, to, not do something else. And so I think we just need to be careful, or at least the OPC is going to view, the drafting of regulations through the lens of what we feel is needed in order for the commission to, carry out its oversight responsibilities. And, I think, I'm obviously open to seeing draft language that a party thinks captures what level of partial consensus has been reached. But, I'm not sure that, we would be okay with that being the end of it. I think we would still push for regulations that reflect what we feel, the law needs to be, in order for the distribution system planning process to, to achieve the goals that we're expecting them to achieve.
Right. I don't necessarily think we need to be talking specifically about metrics right now. I'm more worried about just these issues. I mean, I would imagine once the issues are settled either by the work group or the commission, then that'll make writing the regulations a little easier. At least that would be my hope. Yes, sir.
Yeah. To piggyback on, I believe it was Jacob Berlander's
Berlander's on the call. That's awesome.
Berlin, I'm sorry. My apologies. Attacking, I think looking at this, the graph or this list of partial and non-consensus items, I think we can knock out the partial consensus items. That's some progress.
Well, I like that unilateral decision by you. I don't know if the rest of the parties agree, but if we could do that, that'd be fantastic.
Level of granularity. I think that's a topic that we can probably settle. being that utilities or the commission provides flexibility for the utilities in regards to granularity. I think we can probably agree on a minimum. If anything above or exceeds the minimum is for the utilities to decide. I mean, again, all of these topics are all of these items or these things are something that we're going to later be able to provide more comments or feedback once we see results or a plan presented before us. It allows that level of flexibility in regards to stakeholders, staff, or whomever may want to comment on the results. Level of granularity, scenarios, I thought that was something that we kind of already settled, but I'm sure we can maybe go back there and settle that. Just looking through the list, reliability metrics, I think we can I think you said we want to put that to the side for right now, or the commission, based on the commission's order, they said that some of these items are already existing in other proceedings or other cases, one being reliability metrics, which is 939353. So we can remove that or kind of settle on that. Yeah, so I just briefly going through this list. I feel I have confidence that we can maybe knock out those partial consensus items. The non-consensus items I see seem to be a little more on the technical side, more so. More of them are on the technical side, where we stand or our position is that we allow the utilities to present us with their plan or their methodology in addressing like hosted capacity analysis, dynamically and or system assessments. So locational value assessment, these are things that we will, we're open, we're in support of utilities providing us their plan for that, and the understanding that we'll be able to comment and provide any, revisions or suggested revisions. I mean, that can serve as a beginning or a basis of discussion. We don't have anything at this moment in regards to a basis for discussion other than our own separate thoughts or wants or suggestions. So having a presented plan or method or results to comment on, I think will provide the direction we need to kind of finalize overall regulations. Of course, we got to remain flexible, so we know that all of the utilities all plans will not be created equal. So I think that provides the flexibility for each utility to kind of take their approach to the distribution system or improve distribution system planning.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, how about it? Partial consensus items. Can we just remove the partial? At least we have two optimists.
I don't want to be insensitive to. That's not me. I just want to point out that's not me being insensitive to the impartial or the partial consensus items, but I feel like they are items that we can address and knock out.
All right, that's all right. So, all right, that's fine. I'm with you. All right, Al.
Yeah, and trying to be constructive. So I think with the partial consensus things, we document that partial consensus. That's part of our response to the, and then that becomes a basis for thinking about recommendations. And then there are other non-consensus items where, again, I would like to see what the utilities might do. For example, there was a 1-0 response to a locational value of DER study. Okay, so I think that MEA and the commission came in and said, yeah, we want to see that. And the utility said, no, that's not valuable and it's a waste of time. But locational value as an element of the JADE map was something that I think we all agreed is an important consideration. And so I would love to see what the utilities propose in terms of, okay, we don't want to do a locational value study now, but here's how we plan to deal with locational value of distributed energy resources. that would be very enlightening. And then that would be something that could inform our thinking about what should be in a regulation. And in terms of hosting capacity, a couple of people at the technical conference said, well, the hosting capacity analysis issue and the maps really need to serve the people who need that information, which is the developers and maybe the counties or whatever. And so we should be taking that into consideration. So the utilities, I would invite the utilities to propose how they would see maximizing hosting capacity information and making that available to potential developers and other stakeholders who are really stakeholders, and how they would plan to get there, because we talked about bridging. How do you get there from where we are now to what we need to do? So those kind of proposals would be very helpful to actually see in writing, and it would be useful to actually have as either background or substantial parts of what we suggest to the commission they include in recommendations.
All right. Before you go out, you're talking about hosting capacity maps. The Exelon Utilities had suggested kicking the maps for all types of DERs, dynamic hosting capacity maps, and supporting data within hosting capacity maps to the interconnection work group. Is that?
I'll leave those who are on the interconnection work group to say whether that's where it's going to get resolved. Part of that was bounced to us. Part of it this is where we overlap.
Right.
So
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to see where folks stand on this, and I know it's kind of the stay in your lane type of issue that utility or the commission referenced.
Well, it's in everybody. All of these, again, as I said in something I wrote a month or so ago, these different pieces are in the DSP lane. They're just parts of it. Our job is to pull it together, or the commission's job is to pull it together. It's really, and we're trying to be supportive in that. But I think that we can work with the interconnection working group. We can ask them to make a decision and then incorporate that into recommendations. I don't see this as lanes in that sense, where it's there. Ultimately, there's going to be one distribution grid, and all of these pieces have to fit together.
Understood.
And if we can help the commission, that would be great.
Okay, thank you, sir. Jacob.
Yeah, just to clarify in terms of the hosting capacity maps, why we fully recognizing now some stuff kind of during the last phase we're bouncing back and forth between the working groups, and we felt the maps are really there to enable others to interconnect and enable that process. They aren't necessarily used as part of the distribution system planning process. They aren't used, right? They are a separate thing from the hosting capacity analysis our teams would be doing to evaluate hosting capacity and looking to put forward any hosting capacity upgrade plans or different things like that in the future. So the maps are really external facing for customers and developers to help them as they seek to interconnect. And so that's why we think that's best aligned in the interconnection working group, because that is a little bit separate than from the hosting capacity analysis work that would happen within the distribution planning process.
Does that help at all, Al?
Yeah, thanks. That's helpful. And Jacob, what would you suggest the distribution system planning content would include?
So I think there were several other hosting capacity related items, and just looking quickly at the list of non-consensus items I have in front of me: hosting capacity analysis, the DER forecasting incorporation into determining reserve hosting capacity in right sizing, and forecasting also for hosting capacity upgrade plans, dynamic hosting capacity analysis. I think all those aspects of hosting capacity are in the DSP's lane. I think just the external facing maps are more of an interconnection item than it is a planning item. So there's still a lot of hosting capacity within our swim lane. It was just those that I thought we thought best fit elsewhere.
So great. Is what you are envisioning as an implementation plan, would it consider discussion of those pieces that you just laid out and put it in writing so that we can say, yeah, this is something that should be in the distribution system planning process, so that all utilities understand, have common understanding of the way it should be done? I mean, that would be fine with me.
Yeah, so what we had proposed, right? I think going back to the last phase, I think the utilities agreed that DER forecasting should be incorporated in determining reserve hosting capacity. Just using that one as an example. I think that was the consensus within that discussion. If I remember the discussions last time, that all parties agreed that should be incorporated. It's certainly a process to get to that point and works to implement. So the utilities would then look to provide an implementation plan of, if we agree that DER forecasting should be incorporated in that, here's what the utility is looking to do to achieve that. And that's what that implementation would talk through of looking to achieve that. So that's what we are envisioning as part of providing these implementation plans as part of our filings.
Yeah, great. And you just listed several components of hosting capacity analysis that were part of DSP. You just gave some good detail about one of those components. Can you put that stuff in writing so we can all have it as part of what this is what we want to do, is what we want to see, the specifics that come out of the discussions that we've had so far, that we can say, okay, this is what the utilities are proposing. Okay, this meets, we think, the requirements. It's got a timeline attached to it. We are here now and we want to do the following, and here's what we're going to do. That would be very, very helpful. But just this blank check of saying, we stop discussion now and the utilities just carry the ball the rest of the way without any further definition, I don't think is satisfactory.
Well, Al, it sounds like you'd almost like to see a draft implementation plan.
Well, that's what I was sort of suggesting, but it would be because every utility has their own. I mean, if they can come up with, but as I said, there's only one set of regulations. So if they can hammer out the kind of thing that Jacob was just talking about with that level of detail, so we can see it and understand what they are proposing, then we can say, okay, that's good. And then include that in the recommendations we make to the commission. If we think it needs a little bit more work, then we can have that work within the working group.
Okay. All right. So you're not necessarily looking for are you looking for a draft to be considered by I'll pick on Jacob. So would you want PHI to do a draft implementation plan for the work group's review prior to submission to the commission? I'm just trying to make sure I understand.
This question is directed to me.
I'm sorry. No, I'm talking to Al. I'm sorry if
Okay.
I saw. Jacob Berlin. Al? Dr. Bartlett? Oh,
I wasn't necessarily seeing it as a draft implementation plan. I was seeing it as draft responses to the 14 items that we have to resolve.
Okay. I'm with you.
And you combine that and taking into consideration what both Jacob and DeAndre have said, that we've got some that are partially resolved. Okay, we document that, and for the things that aren't clear, and again, I go back to, just for example, hosting capacity is one, and Jacob just did a nice job of describing the things that should be in DSP and shouldn't. That's the kind of thinking we would like to get nailed down. In terms of locational value assessment, okay, we don't want a locational value study, but this is the way locational value analysis will be incorporated into DS planning.
Okay.
And get a proposal for that. So for each of these items, if we can just get some concrete and specific proposals, then we can say, oh, that's great. Okay, here we go.
All right. Thank you, sir. Jacob Berlin, JB.
Yeah, I mean, I think something we talked a lot about during the last phase, and I think continues to be relevant, and I think the commission certainly acknowledges it, is that this is an iterative process, right? This is an evolution. This isn't all going to happen overnight. And so I think in terms of kind of putting that together, we can certainly take it back and think about it, but I think it it would be more reflective if we're able to kind of develop that and file it, right, as part of our distribution system plans, because again, it's going to be an iterative process. Not all of these things are going to be there immediately. Every utility, like someone said earlier, is in a different place, and so all of these are going to be at different points. And so laying out these transition plans and implementation plans are going to look different for each utility, and I think that's best suited to have that kind of be brought forward as part of the filings that we all do, allowing folks to be able to weigh in, at least again, kind of to DeAndre's point, where we are on some of the non-consensus items, but using those kind of consensus points that we had, use those consensus points that we had as the anchor point to start those implementation plans.
Mr. Cason.
Well, I was responding to something before. I think the discussion's been very good thus far about what should be done. I am, leaning towards Al's, a request for a, better explanation. I'm not saying I would rather not wait until the implementation plan, but some little bit more explanation of some of the thoughts about especially these items that Jacob did a good job of describing, but I still have some open questions. I agree that the maps should probably be in an interconnection work group. I think that is correct. But I think that the other item that was identified, supporting data within hosting capacity maps, yes, if it's the data that is going to be displayed, I agree. But I think that gets into some of the overlap. And that if we're now, it is some of these dynamic hosting capacity analysis and how, the data, is then informs planning, I think is where I think the DSP, is, it has the jurisdiction or the wherewithal to go into it. So I think some better understanding, and I don't have a strong opinion on how we would go forward on this in terms of the partial consensus or not. I think it would be nice to probably go through and at least try to address the ones that we're at partial in the near term, given that there are, as OPC has mentioned, there are ones that people are pretty dug in on.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, Jacob, is that something that utilities might be willing to do, at least the Exelon utilities, in terms of providing a little more detail?
Sorry, I just want to make sure I'm answering the right thing.
I think it was kind of like the explanation you'd given, and Al, why don't you say exactly what you're looking for in terms of the, kind of additional detail, or David could do it. I don't want to put words in your mouth because I know I'll mess it up.
I would like to see in one place the utilities proposal for each of these non-consensus items, taking into consideration the level of detail that Jacob went into about, for example, hosting capacity, and including the suggestion, which I think we would endorse, that the map part be left to the interconnection working group and some of the other aspects, but to have them give us more detail on what they would see being included in it. They don't have to do a draft implementation plan. They basically have to say how they would be proposing that each of these 14 items be handled. So again, if there's a piece that's already identified as consensus, that is partial consensus on that item, then you put that in. And if it's a proposal about how you will incorporate assessment of locational value, without having a locational value study, which is the negative position, then you put that in. How are you going to deal with it? And how? If you don't have it now, how will you see it happening? So that we can then turn to the take those things into consideration. If we like them, when we go to the commission, we say, here's the way we think this particular piece should be handled in the regulations, because the regulations are going to go on for a long time, and none of us in this working group is probably going to be the ones that are at the utility level respond to the regulations. Those decisions are made in other rooms. And so we just want to be clear on what we're going to ask that the utilities do. So the next step would be 14 items, the utilities proposal for how each of those items would be dealt with based on what we have as partial consensus and what they would propose based on the discussions that we've had. So we're not in this stand pat position. Everybody's locked into their positions.
So
Well, it sounds like to me you just want a more detailed explanation of their position, not necessarily that they're a compromise position.
Well,
I still see it as a compromise, but with more information.
No, if a compromise is, I mean, I think that if what Jacob just described in terms of, say, hosting capacity analysis that needs to be done as part of distribution system planning, tell us that, this is what we think we need to be doing. And then we can look at it and say, well, but there's also one other thing, or no, that's great. Again, for locational value, the only discussion was, should we have a location value study or not? But locational value, we all acknowledge, is important. So how are they going to deal with locational value? How would they suggest that locational value assessment be incorporated into distribution system planning? And in terms of, level, I agree with DeAndre that hybrid scenarios, I think we've actually had a lot of discussion about scenarios, but again, a specific telling us in advance of a draft distribution plan what the utilities see as the appropriate information to be incorporated in DSP in relation to each of these 14 items. Then if it's great, we say it's great. And if there's some discussion about some of them, then we have the discussion. Right now, this is all in the air.
So I guess I'll, hearing you kind of describe what you're asking for in terms of, what I'm hearing is basically asking kind of how do we envision some of these partial consensus or non-consensus items. And I think during the last phase, we did provide a lot of, I won't say for all, I recognize, locational value, for example, was one where we didn't necessarily provide that. But for a lot of these, during the last phase, as a utility, we did provide kind of how we envision this to look in the future, right? When we talked about in our comments, forecast, for example, I forget if that was a partial or non-consensus. I just have what I'm looking at just has them all put together. But we outlined how we envisioned and what our vision for forecasting was in terms of incorporating DERs and EVs and all those aspects. So I'm trying to understand how what you're asking for is different from what we had provided previously, and then I guess secondly, in terms of trying to reach consensus to ultimately, what we're looking to do, how would us providing that kind of enable the working group to work in that direction? Again, recognizing to the judge's point earlier, on a lot of these topics, parties are kind of dug into positions.
Jacob, what are you referring to? Because in the straw man, I mean, in the end, the summary outputs that went into the final report were the two straw man positions, right? And
so we had throughout the last phase put in a whole host of comments on each of the topics that we had went through, right? Beyond the straw proposal. Obviously, the straw proposal was the focus on a process, but the utilities have put in comments, throughout the process last time, outlining our position on all these various topics. So while they weren't formally documented in the straw proposal, since the straw proposal is just focused on the process, we did kind of outline for all these topics what our position was.
Right, and those were captured in the report, and that's resulted in this non-consensus list. So, I mean, I think that again, if that's all, there's still those pieces were still non-consensus, right? I mean, that this identification of non-consensus items is based on the commission's reading of the report, which documented in great detail all of those positions. So I don't know, is that all? How do you have any proposals to further move the ball, the discussion, or are we stuck with non-consensus? I guess that's the thing.
Well, it sounds like Jacob's understanding your question as just kind of reiterating the utilities positions on the non-consensus items that were expressed in the previous phase. In terms of the non-consensus items that, how do we move that forward? Given, again, we have got one proposal here. So I don't want to say kick the can down the road, but more or less defer to the utilities on the non-consensus items. And then we have OPC saying we're not going to change our position. The best proposal I've heard so far is from DeAndre and David saying, why don't we try and at least touch on the partial consensus items? I mean, that's, as of right now, that's the only thing I see that could be constructive, unless someone else disagrees.
I'll say, I mean, I think it makes sense to myself, Judge, to kind of talk through the partial consensus. And like I said before, I think even within the non-consensus, there are levels of consensus. So I think it's also worth identifying within those, like, what did we actually all agree on? So I think it's not entirely kicking the can down the road for those non-consensus items. I think it's focusing on what did we agree on within those topics, and then enabling the flexibility for utilities kind of to take it beyond that. So not entirely kicking it down the road, just focusing on where did we reach consensus within that.
So where do we reach consensus in the non-consensus items?
Right.
All right. Go ahead, DeAndre.
Yes. I was just looking through some of the hosting capacity regulations that are existing in Comar now. And I think we can kind of go down the line and knock out some of these items. For instance, the hosting capacity analysis, determining hosting capacity either by circuit feeder or substation. In the regulations, the utilities are required to provide closed and reserved circuit hosting capacity, or they have to provide how much hosting capacity is available for reserved and closed circuits. I guess I asked the utilities, does that mean that you have to perform a circuit by circuit hosting capacity analysis in order to provide whether a circuit is closed or reserved? Because then that answers the question to what level of granularity we have to provide hosting capacity analysis, right? That question is posed to Jacob or Ethan or anyone else from the utility that's on the call.
Yeah, so I think, making sure I'm understanding, I think I agree with you that we do hosting capacity at a circuit level, and if we're required to do it at a circuit level to provide that data or that to meet that Comar requirement, then it makes sense that we're aligning on that level of granularity.
Right. Yeah. So that was my question. If you all are required to provide hosting capacity analysis perform it in order to determine which circuits are closed, reserved, and to then generate a plan to either expand on those existing, to open those circuits back up for more or increase the capacity for those circuits. Does that mean, or does that indicate that, I think, does that answer the question as to determining what level of granularity you all have to perform host and capacity analysis? Because based on my understanding, I think that means that it has to be by circuit by circuit.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds reasonable to me.
Okay, so that's one item that we probably had no consensus or partial consensus on that we can knock out if everyone agrees on that.
All right, no one's saying anything. And DeAndre, where are you looking at on this? Just so I can keep a.
Yes, sir. I tried to put it in the comments, but it's rather long. But you can find it under 2050.
No, not the regs. Just like the
I'm
specific
sorry.
item. It's all right. I just want to make sure I'm following along with you, so I can cross off my kind of to-do.
This is your list of. This is the list you provided for partial and non-consensus items.
All right.
And this is number
15.
Number 15A, right?
All right, that's what I thought. Just want to make sure. And that list was a rough draft. I didn't thoroughly check that over, but I think I got most of the stuff. All right, go ahead, DeAndre.
Some other, just reflecting back on that particular regulation, which is, and just for the rest of the work group, this is 2050-09-06 Q hosting capacity. It says here that a utility shall have a procedure for calculating hosting capacity, accounting for either gross peak or gross minimum loading based on good engineering practice. So that means that DERs will have to be included, correct? And electrification and EV charging, and it will probably have to be considered a load in regards to that. Is that correct?
DeAndre, what number are you on his sheet?
I'm sorry, I was muted. In regards to the sheet, I'm on if you look at the partial and non-consensus items sheet that Judge McLean sent the group, I'm looking at the list of items under number 15, block 5, hosting capacity analysis and system assessment.
Yeah, what letter?
The previous comment was in regards to letter A.
A, yeah, okay.
Now, now I'm looking at maps of all types of DERs. So my question is,
That's E.
Yeah, now I'm kind of looking at the regulations and trying to see what other items or numbers or letters that they might correspond to. And so I'm questioning, or I guess my question is in regards to letter E, trying to determine the types of DERs that should be considered in hosting capacity or analysis. Would that correspond with the COMAR regulation that states that a utility shall have a procedure for calculating hosting capacity, accounting for either gross peak or gross minimum loading based on good engineering practice? So we're talking about gross peak and gross peak loads, right? And would that include DERs or not? And electrification, some of the other.
So this is Dave Bedard. I can speak for PE. We currently do not have a means of forecasting DERs. So in order to do what you mentioned, we would have to have a means of forecasting that. I mean, that's something on our horizon. We're working towards that. but we do not currently have that.
Yeah, and I think similar here, and I go back to what I mentioned before. I think there was consensus that incorporating DER forecasting into hosting capacity upgrades is the right approach, and that's where similar to Dave of like continuing, don't have that currently, but recognize that that's a direction to go, and so that's where we would look to provide a implementation plan as we work to develop that.
Okay. Understood. So I guess the next question is, which of the DRE types are you all going to include in this improved forecast? Because I think that was another item that was on our consensus or non-consensus.
I would have to go back and look specifically. I'm sure within our comments during the last phase, we outlined, what we would be forecasting for DERs and whatnot. Like I said, I think we had fairly extensive comments on the forecasting piece, both in terms of load, EV, electrification, as well as the different types of DERs.
Okay, understood. But that is another item of non-consensus or partial consensus that we'll have to address.
All right. Let me hold you up to DeAndre. Go ahead, Dr. Bartlett.
Yeah, I was just going to say this is a perfect example in terms of DER forecasting. So yes, I think we understood from before that PE doesn't have that capacity, but since we all agree that it's essential, this is something that's going to have to be reflected in regulations. So we're going to have a proposal, and either the utilities make it in terms of how it would be done, or somehow the commission is going to have to do it without input from the utilities. If it's in the previous comments, then Jacob, maybe you can just isolate those and put them forward if you still agree with it. But if it meets the discussion, because this is where we had the discussion about bridging activities, for example, right? And so if we can capture what is being proposed by utilities as a way of dealing with this obviously very key issue where capacity does not presently exist, then what is the commission going to require from utilities? If they don't require it, then maybe we just go on without it, but then you don't have a good distribution system plan. So there has to be some regulatory framework that says this is one of the key items for distribution system planning. So either if you've made a proposal that you think is viable and you just isolate it out of your form of comments, that's great. If you have a proposal that makes sense for the different utilities, without hamstringing somebody, but at the same time doing what is required for good distributed system planning, then propose that to us, and then we'll see it.
Go ahead, DeAndre.
Also, this is where we can kind of point out what should be included in the implementation plan that we're speaking of. In regards to DER forecasting, and this is probably something we already discussed. If according to Dave that they don't have those capabilities right now, then that is something that should be included in the implementation plan as to how they plan on improving or upgrading their systems in order to provide that data. And that's not to say that we don't have that understanding, but I'm just pointing that out as to what should be included in these plans, or what that plan should look like, what these plans should look like.
All right, go ahead, Ethan.
I'm apparently the refer back guy today. I would like to point out that we did include a description in our template, the draft template, that was supposed to give people a taste for instance, BG&E's DER forecasting. what we were going to be doing there. And, it is pretty straightforward. It describes that we will, this is going to be for DERs and mostly PV and EV, because those are what we're going to see. Storage doesn't really have a negative effect, except as you think of it as load, really, because storage actually is a draw on the system. So, I really feel like that what this group, and people are asking for us to see what our plan is so that they see our plan. That's in the process right now. We're going to file these on November 15th. The meetings are planned out for the next couple of months with all the various technical teams. You're going to get the CSNA version of a lot of these items. And, that will be your first opportunity to really see all of the plans and see where we all are in implementation. And, I feel Jacob Auslander's, comment that he expects to be disappointed by us, and that's fine. But, we are going to put forward what we are doing. And I feel like right now we're asking the question when we're just, what are you going to do right before we're about to show you? So I'm a little perplexed.
Go ahead, Dr. Bartlett.
Yeah, but so I mean, I appreciate what Ethan's saying, and they did have that section in there. It was a little bit non-specific, but it was there. But we're talking about regulations that will govern all utilities and the whole process, that will actually assure that people, enter the process of distribution system planning, meeting the requirements of the state that we can identify in advance. And this is clearly one of them, the ability to forecast DERs. And so it's going to have to somehow be addressed in regulations. And so we can wait and see these draft reports and so on and so forth, but then we've already had plenty of discussion on this. We've agreed that it's a necessary item. So that my question would be, how would the utilities propose that we include this item and the others in regulation? And if BGE's report is responsive to that, fine. But that those are two different things, and we're actually talking about essentially establishing the rules for what needs to be included, whether it's in the plans or basically whatever these reports are that people are going to give. But it needs to be included, and it needs to be specified, and we just can't leave it open. So this is all we're asking for, is that these things each of them be specified, clear, so that we can go to the utility, to go to the commission and say, look, these are the things that you're going to have to ask utilities to include, and give them the way to do it from where they are now to where they need to be. But that proposal needs to be concrete. We've had the discussions, we just don't have it in writing. Or if Jacob, if you think it's in there in what you've said before, then fine. Just if you could pull it out and show it to us, that would be great.
Ethan, you said the implementation reports are going to be filed on the 15th of November.
That was the ones that go into the commission, the CSNA,
Right.
which is going to have a lot of this information in it. And that's why I'm a little.
No, I'm just thinking.
That gives people, I feel like that's going to give, I feel like a lot of times here we're talking about, hypotheticals when we're about to have a non-hypothetical for people to work with. And I think that's a lot more useful.
Would it be, rather than trying to dictate what's going to be in the plan now and pushing that, how that's going to develop into the actual DSP, wouldn't it, again, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, would it make more sense to just review what's filed on the 15th and then reflect our disappointments then and see how to improve the process going forward?
I think it'll give people at least something substantive to work with.
Right. That's what, and I was being sarcastic with the disappointment aspect. Anybody? Go ahead, DeAndre.
Yeah, I think that's kind of on the grounds of where we kind of spoke earlier as to
Okay.
allowing the utilities some flexibility to present us with something that we can then comment, revise, or suggest any changes on.
Right. So look at their plans when they file them, see where people think they may be deficient, need more specificity, what have you, and then possibly move those, again, deficiencies and try and improve it through the regulations. Is that essentially what you're saying, DeAndre?
Yeah, but after we've taken some more time to knock out some of these partial consensus and
Right. Yeah. I'm just
narrow it down.
Yeah, I'm just thinking post November 15th. Go ahead, Ethan. Did you want to say anything, sir?
One of the things that I think people are, regulation is generally very broad. It does not say utilities shall implement this by X date. It's generally utilities shall present timeline. It's very open-ended, and I think we need to step back a little from the idea that we're going to write very detailed regulations about grid modernization when grid modernization is an area that is continuously changing. So, we want feedback. That was, the whole point to this proceeding is to provide transparency and stakeholder feedback on our distribution system plans. And that's why we presented the straw man. That's why we presented the template. We're trying to bring forward ways to show you and to get that feedback. And that's the stage we haven't got to yet. Regulation is maybe, I don't know that it should be necessarily, we should focus on making it incredibly detailed, but we do need to decide what shall and shall not be in these reports. And at least when you can see what we are already reporting, that gives you a basis.
Understood. All right. Does anybody else want to weigh in? Does that make sense to folks?
I concur.
Okay. Samantha?
That makes sense to me. I think that's a very reasonable path forward. Though the one thing I do want to raise, and I don't want to raise problems where they might not exist, but just thinking ahead, one of the concerns I have is that it's going to be November 16th. The implementation plans will have been submitted. We'll all take a look at them, as the judge joked. Explain our disappointment with them. I remain concerned that we're going to end up in a similar position we're in now, which is that, there's going to be a proposal on the table. The rest of us participating in this exercise are going to feel like we don't have the necessary information to evaluate the proposal. And, not to repeat myself over and over, but I do think that we should be thinking about how we can use outside sources, if necessary, to help us evaluate the proposal that's going to be on the table as of the 15th. And again, this is where I think personally I get over my skis. Perhaps we could all independently as stakeholders, take a look at how other states have approached these things, just to give ourselves some options. And again, just like a benchmark to evaluate the implementation plans against. But again, I don't want us to end up back here. That's all I'm going to say.
I would agree with that. And I'm sure most folks would say that would be a full consensus item. Dr. Bartlett.
Yeah, and I think this will be the last time I speak. So
you're fine.
Yeah, just one question perhaps to Ethan is whether these and these, what we've been asked to file in November and December is a report. So the utilities are evolving it into a report and a projection, but not necessarily a concrete projection. But these are not their DS plans. These are reports, right? And so I would ask whether Ethan, Jacob, others believe that in these reports they are actually going to provide concrete responses to the 14 issues that are identified as non-consensus, because that's basically what we've been asked to do. I also want to remind us all that we have agreed that the process of stakeholder participation should not be limited to looking at reports on what's already happened. We had that discussion back when how are stakeholders going to participate in the distribution system planning process. So it's supposed to be forward-looking, not backward-looking, and the utilities, in fact, agreed to that and incorporated that into their straw man. So this precedent of let's look at the reports and then see whether we like it or not, so the next one can be better, is kind of setting a pattern that was something we always said isn't the right thing to do. There needs to be prospective participation. So I just want to flag that as well.
Well, I think we're talking about two different things. We're talking about the implementation report that's due on the 15th, and then the actual distribution system plan process and how that's developed. And I think the commission was clear, and I think the utilities updated straw man reflects the need for participation, and that there'll be at least, I don't know,
Right.
three meetings or so.
Right.
Before
It's
it
just
gets to the
that
technical
Ethan was implying that these plans are going to tell us what it is. These reports are really sort of proto plans, and they're going to tell us what the distribution system planning process that we're supposed to develop regulations for. They're going to tell us how that should happen. When we look at these reports, we can say, are those good reports or not good reports, but the distribution system planning process is still our responsibility. And I think they're separate. I'm glad that there's going to be information in there that will help us. I hope that it helps us deal with these non-consensus items.
I wouldn't count on it.
No, I wouldn't bet on it either. But
I don't think they're not going to specifically address those non-consensus items, because I think they're two different things.
Right. Well, Ethan was implying that they would. So...
Okay. Well, if he does, great. Ethan, did I misunderstand?
Well, I think, I'm going to keep going back to the example. The question is DER forecasting. We actually have already opened the curtain there and shown you that both the CS&A goal, that meet anticipated increases in load, that we are working on a DER, Distributed Energy Resource and Load Forecasting System project, the DERLF, that will inform that. That is a part of our distribution system plan upgrades. That is something that it is happening now, that is being developed. It is not in the past, Dr. Bartlett. It is currently in flight into the future. That is the kind of thing you're going to see, and you're going to see every utilities where they are on various pieces like this from these reports. That is going to inform this conversation about these non-consensus items, because I think one of the biggest areas where we versus OPC differ is that we continue to support the diversity of utilities, that we all have very different spaces, very different populations, very different, different geographies. We have different systems in highly technical ways. And then we have SMECO is a completely different organizational structure altogether from the IOUs. BG&E is the only one of the utilities of the IOUs that sits solidly in Maryland. You're going to see differences, and to expect a one-size-fits-all is not something we think we should be doing, and generally I'm going to say is not something that regulations, when they are written, they are always written to accommodate where companies are. Yes, they can direct us to do more, but there is always a basic acknowledgement that there is a difference across the companies. And that's why I think that this report is important, to give people an idea when we continue to have these hypothetical discussions when we could have a discussion based on some real words on a page.
Okay, and just to be clear, I'm not against the idea of looking at these reports and taking what we can from them that helps us think about regulations. I will say that the planning process, as with everything that the commission does, applies to all utilities. And I spent 7 years on the Community Solar Working Group, and those regulations were quite specific. In fact, defining what are contingent parcels, and what could be built and what could not be built on contingent parcels. And that applied to every developer and every utility. So the degree of specificity of regulation is appropriate to everything you say, the differences between utilities, as well as the overall requirements that the state has for the system to be managed the way they need it to be managed. So we'll see, but the other sense, it's not anticipated that these reports will deal specific. They may deal with one or more, many of these 14 items. Is there something about locational value assessment in there? But they may not be the basis that we need for thinking about what should be in regulation. That's why the proposal that we were talking about before, to get the utilities positions and on the partial consensus and on options for moving forward on the non-consensus pieces, will also be helpful. And we've got a little time, so let's see what these reports do. But we don't have all that much time. We are moving towards regulations, and that's where the ship is going, and it needs to go.
All right. I think we've beat this horse enough. And I think probably the best way forward is what Keandre and David suggested. Have folks go back and take a look at least the partial consensus items and see where we might be able to knock a few of those out. Based on our discussions, based upon the commission's order, based upon existing regulations. All right. All right. The other things that I noted, and I realize it's a little after 1, so I apologize. I also realize some of you may be eating as we're doing this meeting, which is fine. Gas and electric planning coordination. The utilities, Exelon Utilities, had a little snippet in their comments, essentially saying that the gas and electric utility planning personnel would have a confidential meeting, discuss distribution plans, and incorporate it into the planning process. Anybody have any thoughts on that? I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the commission's probably going to want to tad more on that, but that's just me. Go ahead, sir. Oh, well, you actually said it was the last time you're going to speak last time, so you're done for today.
Before Al goes, could you repeat that, Chuck? I had to step away. My apologies.
What? It's just talking about the gas and electric planning coordination.
I just have two quick thoughts. One, I'd like to hear what OPC says about this one, and also the idea of a secret meeting. The whole concept of stakeholder input kind of goes out the window there. So whatever.
Okay. Jacob Auslander, you still there, sir?
Yeah. Can you repeat the question?
My question was just any thoughts, concerns based on the Exelon Utilities gas and electric planning coordination snippet that they included. In a nutshell, I don't know, there's a fire truck going by. Just hold on 1 second, please. They had essentially suggested that there would be an annual gas and electric utility planning personnel confidential meeting where they would discuss their distribution system plans, and then each party would then take that information and incorporate it into the planning process. And I opine that the commission probably would like a little more information on this.
Yeah, I think you know, the idea of having secret meetings. I'm assuming that means without.
I object to calling it a secret meeting.
All right. Well,
that is it is, Jacob, you very much understand what critical energy information is. I do, casting aspersions like that is very unnecessary in this.
yeah.
Secret confidential.
I hadn't finished
That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
I hadn't
let's be polite here and not confuse people about what critical energy information is. OPC can request it. You look at it under confidential seal, just like everyone else. And you know, this is secret implies that this is some kind of backroom dealing. It is to share critical energy information. So let's be very transparent about that, right? Transparency is the goal of this.
All right.
Thank
you. With that said, all right, not a fan of the confidential meeting. Got it, Jacob. Anything?
Well, and let me clarify that. I mean, I certainly, if there, you know, when the information that is being exchanged is, you know, CEII or other, just as in any proceeding.
Got it.
And so, you know, I'm just going off of what I'm reading here in this paragraph, and it just talks about a confidential meeting. So I think, you know, the concerns about stakeholder participation, if, you know, the only thing that's being described here is a confidential meeting, I think is a concern. And then, you know, I think there's just not really in this paragraph a whole lot of detail about what the discussion would entail, like what, you know, what the outcome being sought is. So yeah, I think, you know, if the question is just whether the idea of an annual process, I think maybe that that makes sense. But as far as the details of you know, behind the rest of it, I think we would want to know what they are.
Right. And again, I'm just trying to.
I went ahead and put the language in the chat since Jacob apparently has missed the CEII in that sentence that he's referencing. But I wanted to just say, you know, we have had only a couple of months to do this. There is a, you know, let me find the term. It's called a GOAC. There is a gas meeting that happens quarterly. Finding my notes here. Yes, the Gas Operators Advisory Committee meets with the Commission, meets quarterly at the PSC. This issue is going to be raised there, and with all the gas utilities, and we are aware that they have not been, except for BG&E, have not participated in the DSP, and we've asked that they, our representatives are going to reach out to the other gas utilities there, let them know that. Yeah, we're re-extending your invitation, sir. And you know, this coordination is just at the beginning. This is going to be a new thing for us. So yes, details are absolutely spare right now, but we are moving forward on discussions with getting those discussions going with the other gas utilities. So that is an update I can offer in real time.
When is that meeting? When will that occur, if you know, sir?
The 19th. Is when the next GOAC is. Okay. And that's where we're going to just extend the invitation to them for a meeting with the electric utilities to begin discussing how we can hold some kind of a coordination.
Is that, and who exactly are you meeting with? This is I've never heard of this group before.
It is, and I can drop it into the chat.
Okay, thank you.
I only have, you know, 5 notepads open.
No, I hear you. I was just, again, I'm just curious. Is it, well, okay, we'll just leave it at that.
Here, 919. There, the Gas Operators Advisory Committee.
Okay.
Which I just learned about myself in the past few weeks. So.
Okay.
Gas is a new area for me.
Sure. All right. So you don't necessarily know who you're meeting with other than representatives from the gas utilities?
Yeah, all the Maryland gas utilities attend, and we're going to alert them to this, alert them to 91256, the requirement,
Okay.
and begin discussing how we can do coordination.
Okay. So fair to say that your initial salvo is, I think, as you said, it's pretty thin on details, but it would more likely than not increase in depth or in details. Is that fair to say?
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Very good. All right. Jacob, you're not muted. Did you want to talk, or you just forget to mute yourself?
Yeah, I just forgot to mute myself. But I guess while I am talking, I did notice, Ethan, that the that the phrase or that the acronym CEII and other sensitive operational information is in your description here, but it also just talks about a confidential meeting, and that's it. So to the extent you were offended by the word secret, I just was talking about the fact that the process that's laid out here didn't really talk about public participation.
Okay. All right.
Well, I think the public participation, since this is not a gas distribution planning, we are the electric utilities. I wear both hats apparently. We will be bringing then our plans forward as part of the straw man process that we've already proposed. And that's where you would get the transparency. We will then report back on what we are doing, and that's how we interpreted the commission's directive.
All right. Thank you for bringing that up, Ethan. That was one of the things I had kind of asked for. I don't know if you'd provided it, was to provide edits, comments to the utility straw man as to where the gas utilities providers and suppliers should be placed in the process.
Yeah, we may have just missed that one.
Sorry.
We can.
It's all right. Well, I'll
highlight within there where this kind of annual meeting, and then
okay.
Like we had said in this paragraph, would expect as part of the DSP filing to report out on that conversation and meeting and the result of it. But we can go back and
okay. That's cool. I'll just don't worry about it. All right. Anybody else? Don't go anywhere, Jacob. Anybody else on this? So the gas, obviously, this is going to be evolving. All right. The last thing I think I had asked was discussions. Okay. For metrics, I had asked folks to go back and look at the document that OPC had created on the metric subgroup, but again, no comments on it. So obviously we can kick that down the road. But does anybody have any initial thoughts? Jacob, have you guys had any discussions on it?
So we have a meeting scheduled, I think, tomorrow to have conversations. Just so much going on, trying to get everything scheduled. So
I get it.
That one and the generation retirement piece as well. I know that was a point that we're also working on.
Generation retirement piece.
The distribution planning to support generation retirement. I think that was a point from the order. So
okay.
Those are both still wanting feedback and comments on those. They're just more work in progresses and hoping for next meeting to have that ready.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Anybody else thoughts or comments, questions on the metrics, or we're just going to push that to next week or next 2 weeks, I should say, whatever that day is.
I just wanted to call out too, there is an interaction coming with another work group as far as the generation retirements resource adequacy question. That is being at the beginning of conversations in the energy storage work group, where there will, have a little bit more of a tool to apply to the problem. So just bear in mind that stakeholders here, I wanted people to bear in mind that there are other work groups thinking about that issue from the point of view of DER deployment.
All right. All right. Thank you, sir. All right. Anybody else? All right. So we'll meet again on September 26th. We'll go back to 10 o'clock. And we'll be looking for the utilities are going to provide some edits, or I'd like everybody to provide comments, edits, to the utilities straw man as to where gas utilities providers and suppliers should be placed in that process. Take a look at the partial consensus items from the order and my list. Again, my list may not be complete, so please double check the report and see where we might be able to reach some consensus or knock some things out. Metrics, I'm going to be harping on that. Like I said, we got 3, maybe 4 meetings left before the November 15th report deadline. And then Jacob's going to hopefully provide an update on the DSP retirement planning. Is that what DSP retirement?
Yeah, I forget exactly the language, but it's in there around, how can distribution planning support transmission and generation?
Gotcha. All right, I'll double check and make sure I got the language correct. And I think that's it. And I'll reach out to the interconnection work group leader to see what his thoughts are on those 3 issues that we talked about punting to them. I'm sure it won't be an issue. But anybody else? All right. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, Judge. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.